Welcome back to the channel. I wanted to come out today from my kitchen and say that I don't think that Nick Fuentes is popular because he is incredibly wise. I think he's popular because he's incredibly willing. Let's get into it.
Model. What did you see as like the most important gatekeepers that needed to be overturned, pushed aside in order to do this?
It was the Zionist Jews, like Dave Rubin, like Ben Shapiro, like Dennis Prager. It was these the guys that were really controlling the media apparatus that seemed to me to be the biggest impediment.
Is niche farming the future?
Nick Fuentes recently went on Tucker Carlson's show and he proved yet again that I don't think that this man is a brilliant orator of any type of political stripes from conservatism that is any way different than what would be simply niche farming. And niche farming is a YouTube tactic where people will seek out what is their niche within a market so that they can speak to those people who may not be watching other channels in abundance, or they may take umbrage with something that's said on a normie political channel like Ben Shapiro. So they're looking for an alternative. And I think that Nick Fuentes has quite frankly just hit his niche.
Did you do it?
I started a YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I was in my parents' basement and I put up a green screen. I got my computer webcam and I just started going live every night in the same way that I did at RSBN. I just did it on my own channel, where I had creative control over it. And at that point, I basically mounted an attack on the conservative establishment from the outside.
Now let's define niche farming exactly. In agriculture, a niche crop is a rare crop like saffron or truffles, and it's valuable because it is hard to find. Online, the same principle holds true. The rarer your opinion and the louder the crowd that gathers around it, the internet rewards this scarcity with clicks, followers, and influence because you're saying the thing simply that no one else is willing to say. So if the mainstream right says we should have border security, the niche farmer says we should ban immigrants completely. Now we've seen that move in abundance, and I don't think that's a niche view anymore. If conservatives say men should lead families, the niche farmer says women shouldn't vote. So this is the pattern. You just go with the normie conservative opinion and you go a little bit more extreme, you find your niche. And of course, Nick Fuentes has done that so much with the anti-zionist niche that he has farmed and farmed very fruitfully. So I actually don't think that his play may even represent where he came from or where he actually stands politically, as much as it stands for a cynical play to try to remain relevant when, truthfully, he doesn't seem to be brilliant in my opinion. Now, that doesn't mean that he's wrong all the time, and I won't participate in just blanket condemnations of other conservative voices because I'm sure that he's right about some things. I don't really give him a whole lot of my time, so I can't really say if, I agree with him or disagree, and that doesn't even matter. I just think that his play could be very cynical in the way that he's approaching a part of the right that no one else is, other than maybe Candace, Tucker, and some of the other ones who have been more on that end of things.
And pretend to be one of them and bypass the gatekeepers, the censors. I said, or I could kind of be in the wilderness and I would be alone and I would be radioactive, but I could challenge the credibility and legitimacy of the conservative movement.
Nick Fuentes has definitely been a part of the outrage economy, and he has utilized that to his benefit. He says the quiet part out loud, not because it needs to be said, but because no one else is willing to say it. And that's the trick. He's not leading men. He is farming them, and he's cultivating resentment like crops.
Well, I kind of took a page from Trump's playbook, which is that you have to, in the country, the left was hegemonic over all the institutions. And you have this organized opposition to the left and the Democrats and all the left-wing controlled institutions. And the organized opposition comes from movement conservatism, the Republican Party, Fox News, the sort of constellation of conservative institutions. And I said, the problem is whether you go Democrat or you go Republican, you're kind of just like getting the same thing. You're getting the establishment effectively.
Here's the danger. I think that when people attribute a lot of the world's ills to one specific part of a population, that they may be doing the easy psychological thing, which is just othering a certain group or ostracizing a certain group because it becomes easy. So if I can point every one of the United States ills or foreign policy foibles to one specific country, specifically Israel, then I can just more psychologically and readily, easily point everything to one problem group or problem ethnicity, and that becomes really dangerous because the Bible tells us that every ethnicity of people originated from a broken man, Adam, and that everyone has sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So it's not really reasonable to point every single thing. Now, that does not mean that we can't recognize patterns with certain people groups, and psychologically, that's part of what social psychology is testing out how different people groups operate within the systems of the world and the systems of other people. So it is relevant to say that, the value sets of, immigrants from like Saudi Arabia hold a different value set than the ones that come from Israel, and that they'll behave differently within those contexts. But pointing every one of the world's ills to one specific people group is not psychologically rigorous in your thought. It's not intellectually honest. It's actually just taking the easy way out. And quite frankly, I worry a little bit about Nick because if you can point everything to Zionism, we are missing the very obvious fact that Islam is taking a large portion of people into their midst, even Westerners, converting at a large pace, and then also immigrating to Western countries at a large pace. If there is one people group who has the greatest claim to take down Christianity, it is certainly not Judaism. It is certainly not one that is so rigorous in accepting converts as Judaism is. Whereas Islam will take you in day one and you'll just be part of what has been described as, sort of a teenage boy doing the things that they want to do in terms of what their doctrine is. Now, I don't study Islam. I don't study Judaism other than what's written in the Old Testament, quite frankly. However, I'm just making the case that Nick Fuentes, if he's pointing shade at one particular group of people, he is definitely missing the other threats to Christianity and potentially even America First policy from a vast swath of other groups of people. So Nick, I know you'll never hear this, but if you ever do, I'm just a psychologist from Ohio, and I would hazard a guess that it's being intellectually unrigorous to point every one of the world's ills at one singular people group.
We just know. We just know that he was truly betrayed in one of the most egregious ways that I think I've ever seen. It has made me lose faith in politics. It has made me fully lose faith in Trump. And my heart aches for the fact that he gave so much of his life to Trump and to politics. And they just were like, nope, that is it. It serves us or it doesn't serve us, and we want to move on. And so here's a holiday.
I have similar concerns with Candace right now as she begins to blame the Fed and potentially even the Trump administration for the death of Charlie Kirk. I would hazard a guess that she is doing the same thing in niche farming. It is not the popular or the demonstrably middling view to say that Charlie Kirk was killed by anyone other than a leftist who got overtaken by his furry transitioning boyfriend. However, when she corners that market, when she says the conspiracy theory, she gets the audience that would have otherwise, just been out here wondering and conspiratorial about things. So Candace and I believe Nick Fuentes are doing similar things, and I believe that they're actually quite wise about how they're gaining an audience, but possibly not as brilliant as people imagine. They're just willing to say the thing that other people aren't. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think Candace and Nick get some things right, just like Andrew Tate might at times. That doesn't mean that I condemn or denounce or whatever anyone. That's not my job. I am a psychologist who loves America and wants my children to grow up in a thriving American culture and system which has revived classical architecture, education, and family values. So I don't think that Candace or any of them are wrong all the time, but I do think that we've seen the YouTube manifestation or the Twitter X manifestation of simply niche farming, and they're doing it really well. So that doesn't mean that they believe everything they're saying. Candace is, of course, just asking questions. She's always just asking questions. So, but what she's insinuating, maybe she doesn't even believe that Charlie Kirk was killed by Trump somehow. Maybe she doesn't even believe that, but she knows the niche is there. My chicken is knocking at the door right now. I must be time to feed him. So, if you want to rebuild a culture, start with virtue. If you want to lead men, start with humility. And if you want to fight lies, don't imitate their tactics. Instead, when you farm outrage, you reap destruction. So we're not here to just simply denounce people and be that twit mob that just is denouncing everyone and is always concerned and seeking understanding. That time has passed. But Nick Fuentes didn't discover a new truth. I think he discovered a new market, and we'd better stop confusing moral courage with marketing.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, Martin Luther King, what about this holiday? What about this boulevard? Anyways, let me knock it out. Like, they're gonna give Charlie Kirk a boulevard. They already did. They did in Israel. They gave him a freaking boulevard. It's like, as soon as they give you a boulevard and a holiday, they definitely killed you.
If you can support any type of psychologist from Ohio who's a Midwestern midwit who's simply looking to create or help create a future of faith, fatherhood, and freedom in America, please like, share, and subscribe. I appreciate so much all the support.